Okay, so we are going to do the bookstore, at least start the bookstore app, and this is not the full thing, but get started on it. And this is chapter 12, kind of in the middle. And really what is new to us here are these many-to-many relationships and in the entity framework, EF Core. And so up until this point, we haven't done many-to-many. Certainly, that is new. And also what is new in this demonstration is instead of seeding all of our data in one file, we kind of extract in all of our seed data into smaller files, and that kind of just helps keep everything clean, if you will. So create a new project, just go through the normal stuff here, and bookstore, I'll just call this V1. And so in this bookstore, we have authors and books. So a book can have many authors is the idea. You know, probably most books, well, even the book that we're in has two authors, right? So a book can definitely have more than one author. So maybe many books have one author, but maybe many books have multiple authors. So a book can have many authors as well as an author can have many books. And so that's kind of our many-to-many relationship. And we'll kind of start out with the author class, and we're going to then create the book class. Right, these are our models, so ultimately these will be tables in our database. And again, what's new here is our many-to-many relationship. So I have our constructor here, which I have to hold off on coding it because I need a property first before I can kind of code this out. And kind of down at the bottom here, I'm going to create our collection of books. So let me create our collection of books. Called books and get and set. Now they call this a skip nav property. And before we had what was called just a navigation property that just kind of helps MVC understand how to get into the table, right? To navigate to that table, right? Why this is called a skip nav property is because when you have a many-to-many relationship, MVC will create a join table, right? That gets rid of the many-to-many relationship. And well, this navigation property allows you to skip over that join table and get directly to the other table that you need to get the data out of. So now that we have a collection of books, now we can bring back our constructor and we can set the books property equal to a new, and they explain why we use a hash set instead of like a list, which is to say that we just want to make sure that when an author has a list of books, that list of books is a unique list of books. We're not going to have the same book twice. And so when you use this shorthand notation, of course you don't need the curlies, and that's why that's barking at me. Then that cleans up. So this is again a little bit more explicit than we've been in the past, and we say whenever we, create an author, that we can pass that to the constructor. We can pass a list of books, and set that author's list of books that way. Of course, we have our author ID, which is going to be our primary key. There we go. And an author first name. Last name. And then we got some validation here. Okay, we know that max length is going to change our database schema. To be nvarchar with 200 characters instead of nvarchar max. I'm glad to see we're still kind of doing this validation. Obviously, this is a method we need to write, the check author method inside of the validation controller. And the area will be called admin. Pass in first name and comma operation. One string. Have a read-only property for full name. And our collection of books. Now, one thing that's jumping out to me is obviously there is a first name field. Curious about this operation field. I think I'm going to have to get some clarity on around that. That's not clear to me at this point where operation would be coming from. There is no property called operation. So anyways, I know there's more to do around this validation, because this is going to obviously hit the database and see if the author already exists based on their first name and whatever their operation may be. Maybe, this operation might be like an insert operation. When we go to insert, maybe it'll just say operation equal to insert. Well, we'll come back to that. On to the book class. Just something to keep an eye on. Again, our book is going to have a collection of authors called authors. I always do this double arrow. So all we're doing here is when we construct a book, that we make that book have basically an empty hash set of authors. So we're not really putting any authors in at this point. It's just an empty collection. So here's our primary key. Okay, so we have a title property and a price property. I'll set the minimum and max, right? So you guys might remember inside of the data types, it has a max value. So instead of just typing like $1 million or whatever that is, 10 million, I'll just say double dot max value. It's also an interesting table because books also relate with genres, right? So when we have a genre ID, this is a foreign key property by the convention, and we also have a genre acquired. There we go. Now we don't have the genre class created yet, so I'll just spin that up, right click, add class, create that so at least it's recognized. Double check it real quick. Here's our constructor, book ID, title, price, genre ID, genre, our collection of authors. Cool, onto genre. So genre has a collection of books. Which will wind up being a one-to-many relationship, right? One genre can have many books, but a book can only have one genre. Right, so that's a one-to-many relationship between genre and books. Okay, get that syntax right. Validation controller, admin area. Interesting that it's, you know, they make this a string, so it's not auto-incrementing the genre ID. Right, if it were an int, it would be auto-incrementing, and identity on the database side. But that's in line with what they've been doing in other places in the book. Prop. Got a squeaky wheel.
Yeah, you can live there.
Error message. Okay, and that's the genre class. So those are our models. For the entities, right now we're gonna fill up some seed data, and then we will go ahead and create our database, right? And that's all the further that this gets, right? We create the models, create the seed data, create the database, and that's pause until we continue. And so, like everything else, I'm going to go ahead and install the tools that are needed and get the connection string wired up and the dependency injection, et cetera, et cetera. So that'll be a couple of steps I take in between here. Package manager. Okay, entity framework tools. Entity framework core tools, install those. And Entity framework core SQL Server. Okay. Okay. Last week Friday, I went ahead and did some of the work to get the connection string and all that configured. So inside of app settings JSON, right? I'm just gonna go ahead and take my connection string from the last video that I put out there, right? So I put a comma right here and paste my connection string. So basically my database is called Bookstore. That is going to be on my local instance of Microsoft SQL Server. And the connection string is Bookstore context. And I'm just going to go ahead and go into my SQL Server instance and delete the bookstore that's there, because we're going to be recreating it. So the bookstore database is no longer there under Object Explorer, and I've got my app settings configured. The other thing is that dependency injection, again, just doing a little copy and pasting here from last week, and after the add controllers with view, add that line right there. Now we don't have the class bookstore context, so let's create the bookstore context class. Add class to at least make it recognized, and we got to say using the models folder. So using bookstore dot models. That makes you happy. And it doesn't like my add DB context. Now I tried builder services dot. Okay, there we go. I think I need to build out my context class a little bit more. And so for that, we got to say DB context. In order to bring that in, we got to bring in the using up top, but we'll say DB context. And if I click on that, it'll bring in my using statement. Save on that. And now this is happy. Everyone's happy because and the constructor, pretty standard. Three tables. First one is genre. Next one is books. Finally, authors. Genres, books, and authors. Okay, so now, historically, we just put all of our seed data right in this method, and now that we're starting to have more entities, and we'll continue to have more entities, the practice is to not store too much code in one file, kind of thing, right? You shouldn't be able to scroll and scroll and scroll. So we break it up into smaller chunks, right? That's the idea. And so, what do we have? We have 3 tables with seed data and a 4th table that's that join table, right? So we have 4 tables. So we break this up into 4 classes. So let's add those 4 classes. One's called configure genres. Obviously, that's a seed data for, as you might guess, the genres. Add class configure authors. Then we've got another one, add class configure books. Authors, books, genres. Authors, books, genres, book authors. Add class. This is our join table, right? Book authors.
Yes.
So 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 configuring plus the context file. And then it really simplifies our context file. We say model builder apply configuration. Now, configure genres. We need to inherit entity type configuration. Okay. My favorite hotkey in Visual Studio. Control dot enter. And that brings in the interface. But the reason I just wanted to bring in that interface is so that back in my bookstore context that goes away. Right, so let me do that 3 more times. Copy, paste, paste, paste. And it's going to be configure books. Authors. Configure book authors, configure books. So I'm going to copy this. Now don't be like me and make the mistake that I made last Friday. When I put this on configure books, I need to change the type here to be type of book. Then I can hit Control dot enter. And should be good on book. Do the same paste on type of author. And book author. On this one, the type that we put in the bracket is still book. It's that join table. So of course it wanted me, so the first time I hit Control.Enter, it brings in the Entity Framework core, and then the second time I hit Control.Enter, it implements the interface. And now my context is all happy, and my context is down to 4 lines of code inside of that method. And so now we actually have to go into these 1, 2, 3, 4 configure, double check. We'll look at that. That's not configure genres. I still made the mistake. Genre. Genre is not compiling. Suddenly. Okay. I refactored my code on accident somehow. This is the genre class, and it I'm not sure how I refactored that. I guess that's the downfall of hotkeys. Let's do a build. Build succeeded. Let me just back up. Genre has a list of books, which is correct. So that's author, that's book, that's book, that's genre. All right. Now our seed data. So we'll start with authors. So in the student download, you can see there's book apps and then chapter 12 bookstore data. And so if you go into there, into models, there you can kind of see where you can copy and paste your seed data. So let's go into authors, because I think that's where we're at.
Sorry, was in book apps or solution?
Yeah, book apps.
Oh, okay.
Chapter 12 bookstore data. So I'm just going to extract the seed data here for our authors. And the only thing is like, hey, you don't know what entity is. Well, let's name this entity. And now it knows what entity is. So that's configure author. Let's configure, sure, we'll do books next. So inside of book, if we remember kind of going back to some of the theory from last week, that cascading deletes are kind of the default. And what are we looking at? We're looking at our books, right? And we are changing that default behavior so that basically if we delete a genre, it doesn't also delete all those books that had that genre, right? Instead, this couple lines of code, this will basically throw an exception. And if you don't handle that exception, the user will get a big nasty error message, right, in the website. Kind of like inside Rankin when it crashes and you see a bunch of red text. That's basically what the user would see. And it would not make any sense to the user. So, probably you want to put some stuff into try catch and not give nasty error messages. But that's basically what that's doing. So that we delete a genre, it does not also delete all the books that have that genre. So we'll copy that seed data in to our configure book. Yes, sir.
Where do we find this file again?
You're going to go to your student downloads. Then you're going to go book apps. And then there's chapter 12 bookstore data. Bookstore models, there they are. Do you have your student downloads folder? You might need to re-download the student downloads. In the beginning, in the front of the book, there's an explanation how to get student downloads. It's on the Muroc website. Somewhere, introduction, Roman numeral XVII. So we're talking 17. If I remember my Roman numerals, and this says how our downloadable files can help you learn. Here's the explanation on how to get those. XVII. This was books. Let's paste this. Now the book does, and the seed data does, make this books plural, but notice it's singular here.
That's because genre only you can only have one genre, and you can have many books.
Right, but it's giving me a fit. So the book can have a single genre, and the genre can have many books. That does make sense. Genre has many books. Is that compiling for you?
Yeah, I think look at your configure books. Is that the one you're looking at?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure where you're.
Well, a genre with many books. So here's your genre, but this is still barking at me because I accidentally refactored this. And so inside of genre, I think that's there. I don't want you to change that. Like it wants me to put this back into a genre. No, I don't want that. It says tab to accept. I don't want that. Go away. So
is it with many or has many? Which one are you? With many. Okay. Yeah, let's dive up to.
it says book does not contain a definition for books. Yeah, just finding that. You're right there. I need a
Yeah.
back on my book equals string dot empty. And probably again on genre equals null.
So you have a public book genre, but shouldn't it be a public genre genre? I think that's your issue.
Oh yeah, that's true. Online.
On line
25.
20.
There she is.
Y'all be getting autographs.
Well, what it was, I used that hockey. As soon as I say it's my favorite thing in the world,
Lets you down.
it breaks a bunch of things. So yeah, I don't know. Again, control dot is your friend, but read I guess is my mistake. Read its suggestion before you just click enter. So control dot is nice, good hotkey. My mistake was I didn't read. Anyways, what was a suggested fix, and it refactored some of my genre into books, and there we go. So now if I build this. We have one success, and I go back to, I was just doing configure books, and now it knows that my genre has books because there's no conflicts. My book has a genre, and genre has, because this was not linking up to genre, it couldn't, like it didn't know that it was a genre that has a list of books, like it didn't know where that was going. Okay, so that was configure books. Good. So we have configured authors, we have configured books. Let's configure genres. So back in our files, configure genres.
I think for those configure files, you have to do like internal class.
Good eye. So on these, we mark these as internal. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Now again, the naming convention here, you have to know the column names. But again, thankfully, because it's all by convention, we go configure book author. So we're configuring book authors table, where a book ID and an author's author ID. So basically the book number and the author number. Gets everything linking together. And if all the stars align, we don't have any more typos. Let's go to our package manager console.
Curious to see if you get the same database error as I did. Like in flipping forwarding keys.
Add migration. All the stars aligned for me, but they often do not. So there's bookstore, there's tables, and our books and our authors and our genres, and our author book. View data, our genre, our books, our authors, and our author book.